And for more on this, we are joined in studio now as well by Daniel Pomerantz, CEO of Reality Check and a legal expert, particularly on international law. It's good to have you in here with us, Daniel.
Thank you.
The big question everyone's thrown around this entire war is proportionality. What is a proportional response to an enemy that burns children alive? I want to discuss just what Israel has done so far and what they could be doing under international law.
Yeah, people throw around that word and they don't really understand what it means. I mean, does it mean that Israel should burn alive 40 children also and then call it a day? Clearly not. So what does it mean? And the answer is that it's not a matter of opinion. It's defined in a number of places, in particular Section 51 to the First Additional Protocol to the Geneva Conventions, which says basically you have to be proportional to the threat that you're facing. There's more technical language, but that's really what it comes down to. The threat Israel's facing is the existence of Hamas. Their leadership has said, we will do October 7th a second time and a third time and a fourth time. We found copies of Mein Kampf and ISIS literature. This is a Nazi-based organization intent on annihilating Israel and the Jewish people. So the threat is Hamas's existence at all. Therefore, the proportional response has to be eliminating Hamas as an organization that's capable of functioning. Specifically, international law says that you cannot create harm to civilian people or infrastructure that is excessive in relation to the military objectives that you need to seek. So that could mean if Hamas puts 100 civilians in front of a rocket launcher, that 100 civilians might not be excessive if the rocket launcher has to be destroyed. So that's the way that international law works. It's not based on numbers. But if we do want to talk about numbers, here's an interesting number that hasn't been spoken about much but really should. Hamas claims that Israel's killed over 11,000 people. Now, there are a number of reasons why that figure might not be accurate, but even assuming that it is, Israel's destroyed over 15,000 targets. That means, if you do the math, Israel has killed less than one person per strike, and over a fourth of Israel's strikes have killed no people at all. This is a military that's capable of destroying hundreds or thousands of people with a single attack, and yet on average has killed less than one person per attack. That alone shows you an enormous amount of restraint and caution on the part of Israel.
And I actually want to look at this from a tactical level too, as long as we still have you in studio, General, because you have experience fighting on the ground there, and you can give us a description of just what that sort of dense urban fighting looks like.
I think it's one of the main complicated urban area that has been under a fight during the last dozens of years. What you see here is the IDF succeed to connect together the way of working together with Air Force and ground forces together in order to reach or to strike targets that are recognized and identified as the targets of the enemy of those murderers. And you have to close a very close circles. First of all, plans and under your movement in activities, unless you have to be on readiness. That's the way of evacuating people from the north to the south, because in everywhere you have people are coming from the underground tunnels using RPGs, anti-tank missiles, etc., shooting, launching, and going back to the underground tunnels and escaping and using civilian areas as a shelter for themselves, like what you see tonight with the hospitals and what was described by the Israeli. And I think by this, Israel shows why Israel is waiting 3 days near Shifa Hospital, in order, first of all, to strengthen the legitimation, to show the people we prefer to not to, and it's danger for the soldiers, not to move, not to maneuver, and to be around Shifa, but show the world evidence what's going in Shifa or in Rantisi Hospital or in others, just to bring the right of us to react and also to prepare a very clear intelligence to find the tree in the forest and to strike him.
And Daniel, I want to go further into that, because ultimately we do see these images, people firing RPGs from outside of hospitals, these command centers being built directly under the hospitals. Under those circumstances, what is permitted? What are the actions?
Well, what's happening here is really extraordinary, because there's what's permitted and there's what Israel's doing, which is far more restrained than what international law requires. Right now, Israel's established a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians to escape out of the combat areas into relative safety. As civilians have been escaping, Hamas has been firing on Palestinian civilians, and the IDF has been protecting those civilians by returning fire. Now, this is extraordinary. Think about what this means. The IDF is protecting Palestinian civilians. Hamas is attacking Palestinian civilians. This is, at the very least, rare, if not entirely unique in the history of human civilization, that a country is actually protecting the enemy's civilians while the enemy combatants are attacking those civilians. It's simply unheard of. So what Israel would have to do under international law is not intentionally target civilians, not act in a way that excessively harms civilians. And when civilians are being used as human shields, it's very difficult to do. What Israel's done is gone beyond that. Israeli soldiers are fighting to protect his civilians while Hamas is shooting at them. So far, over 40 Israeli soldiers have fallen. That means it is not an exaggeration to say Israeli soldiers are literally sacrificing their lives to fight for Palestinians. That is simply extraordinary.
I mean, given how many steps Israel has taken to reduce civilian casualties, to protect the enemy's civilians in this case, how does Israel get the international community, the UN, and all these world leaders saying it's excessive to just back off?
Well, Hamas has been working on this for years and building the case for this for years. It began with the Durban Conference in 2001, which was called a diplomatic intifada. They've invested a tremendous amount of money and diplomacy and resources into building an image of Israel as being excessive. And the reason they've done that is because it's the only way they can win. Militarily, they can't beat the IDF. The only way they win is if the IDF stops its operation before it's complete. So they're attempting to create a situation in which the IDF might be tempted to do that. I don't think that's going to happen, but they see that as their one path to success, and they've invested a tremendous amount in trying to accomplish that.
You have a very clear example what happened on the second day of the war. While Hamas tried to make a big noise all over the world that Israel killed in the hospital hundreds of people by launching or striking them from the air. Later on, what was found and what Israel proved that it was a failure launcher of rocket from Jihad Islamic, I think. How many people has been killed under this report? I didn't hear even less than 5.
The report claimed it was 500. European intelligence agencies have established that it is somewhere between 10 and 50. So when we look at these figures of casualties, some of them aren't even real at all. Some of them are people that Hamas has shot. Of the 10,000 rockets Hamas has shot at Israel, 10% of them have fallen short and landed in Gaza. And on top of that, the Associated Press recently released a report exposing that Hamas, as a rule, never distinguishes combatants from civilians when they give these casualty figures, and never distinguishes the cause of death, whether it was from an Israeli strike or from Hamas shooting them itself. This is the Associated Press saying outright that the figures the world has are not reliable.
As more as the reports that are coming from foreign reporters from Gaza will be under showing the evidence, they need even to be a little bit really brave in order to give these reports against the wind that are coming from the street in some capitals in Europe, and also making a test to the leadership of Europe in some countries while they understand the atmosphere in the street. A lot of Muslim civilians, millions of them that are living in their places. So what you see from the EU statement before, what you show, it's something that is not usual, and it's taking a lot of effort. Why? Because this is our situation for many years, and I think today, by the way what we are doing and trying, we will not win that legitimation, but we will succeed to make it more and more narrow, to convince more and more high figures in this world that what's going in Gaza, it's a big lie. And I think a lot of those who are even now telling against Israel that Israel is making this kind of crimes, etc., are basically knows what will be in their places in a few years from now.
You know, what people in the world, I think, may not realize is that this really is Israel's 9/11, in the sense that after 9/11, as Americans, we didn't think we were going to lose. We knew we would win, but we knew it was a life and death struggle, and that it was possible. Al-Qaeda had proved it was possible that we could lose and that America could be destroyed. And had anyone asked America to stop short of destroying Al-Qaeda, America would not have tolerated that for one instant. People need to understand that Israelis, left, right, center, religious, secular, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, everyone in Israel has the strong feeling that this is a fight for survival, and there is no amount of leverage in the world that can overpower the sense that you are fighting for survival. When the world understands that, the world understands what it is possible to convince Israel to do and not do in furtherance of the safety of its citizens.
And just to make it clear, you see that Israel stopped around Shifa. From around 3 to 4 days, we are succeed to surround Shifa hospitals. We are only few meters from the hospitals. And what you see, more and more leaders from Europe, officially from United States, are telling, yes, we know and confirm that under the ground in Shifa, there is control and command base for Hamas, and coming more and more voices that you didn't hear before. Just imagine what have been done to Israel under a situation that in Friday, in a military way, you have to enter there on Friday. But the way that we hold it, and we told the IDF, don't go inside, is just we have to tell the real story. We have to bring the evidence like tonight. And we pay for it a lot of risk to the soldiers' life under this war. You see that Israel, I think, succeed to add more and more, let's say, support from what it claimed from the first day of this war.
And speaking of evidence of everything that's happened, I want to thank you both for this discussion and the analysis.